So the Russian government has allegedly gotten millions of dollars to some of the biggest right-wing influencers in the world who just so happen to say things like,
"This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy," being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
Right, and so that is Tim Pool. He's one of 6 big personalities at a Tennessee-based company by the name of Tenet Media. But the biggest ones there, besides him, being the likes of Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin. And with this, I want to say, one, they, along with Tenet Media itself, are alleged to be just one key part of a massive Russian influence campaign targeting unwitting Americans all over the country. And two, to be clear, neither Tenet Media or anyone at the company is actually being accused of wrongdoing. Right? And I'm not saying Tim Pool was ordered to say those things about Ukraine. Part of this alleged Russian scheme could just be Russian operatives seeing creators saying things that they love, right? Pro-Russian talking points and going, let's make sure these guys don't have to worry about cash. Which, funny enough, is a tactic that Tim Pool himself talked about in the past, though through a slightly different veil.
So what happens with social media, particularly YouTube, where it's really easy, you can have a foreign agent or even the government or some corporation or whatever say, this guy talks about things that we really like. Dump ad money into his channel through Google AdSense, and they'll never know we were the ones funding him, and you can't prove it.
Because all of this actually has to do with the DOJ charging 2 employees of the Russian state-controlled media network RT with conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And they're accused of secretly paying $10 million to a company in Tennessee that's now widely understood to be Tenet Media to spread nearly 2,000 English-language videos on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and X. With one unidentified influencer, for example, reportedly getting paid $400,000 a month, with that coming after a $100,000 signing bonus. And so, with all this, you had AG Merrick Garland saying, the subject matter and content of many of the videos were often consistent with Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core Russian interests, particularly its ongoing war in Ukraine. Right, and one of the examples provided is that the Tennessee company was reportedly told to blame Ukraine for an attack on a concert venue in Moscow back in March, even though ISIS had already claimed responsibility. With then the company's founder allegedly replying by saying one of the contributors would be happy to cover. And there, like I said, Tenet Media isn't actually named in the indictment or being accused of anything right now. But the company's co-founders, right-wing influencer Lauren Chen and her husband, Liam Donovan, allegedly knew the money came from Russia. And actually with that, we're now seeing that Chen's contract with the conservative media company Blaze has been terminated in light of the allegations. But also, very notably, it's not clear that anyone besides her and Donovan were aware of what was going on at Tenet. Right? And you also have the indictment alleging that at least 2 contributors were misled about the true source of the site's funding. Right? And so with all that, you had Poole, along with Johnson and Rubin, issuing statements on social media saying that they were victims and they hadn't done anything wrong. With Poole, for example, saying, should these allegations prove true, I, as well as the other personalities and commentators, were deceived and are victims. That being said, we still do not know what is true, as these are only allegations. And finally, adding, Putin is a scumbag, Russia sucks donkey balls. Also, seemingly regarding his past comments on Ukraine, he appeared to sarcastically write, upon reflection, I now understand that Ukraine is our greatest ally. As the breadbasket of Europe and a peace-loving people, we cannot allow the fascist Russians to continue their crimes against humanity. We must redouble our efforts and provide an additional $200 billion at once. But really, your opinion on Tim Pool or any of these other creators aside, right, the focus of this story is on Ukraine. That is a key thing. Because this Tenet Media thing, it is just one small piece of the puzzle. In fact, reportedly, this whole Russian influence campaign has been codenamed Doppelganger. And according to the DOJ, it's run by Sergei Kiryenko, a former prime minister who's now Putin's first deputy chief of staff. And with that, the department actually published a document produced for a Russian company by the name of the Social Design Agency, detailing something called the Good Old USA Project. And there, the top objective was to, quote, increase the percentage of Americans who believe that the US has been doing way too much to support Ukraine. And with that, they were apparently targeting certain groups in particular, including residents of swing states and conservative states, U.S. citizens of Hispanic descent, and American Jews. But then also, lastly, the, quote, community of American gamers, users of Reddit and image boards such as 4chan, and the documents describing this cohort as the, quote, backbone of right-wing trends in the U.S. segment of the internet. And then besides that, I should also say the document, along with the others obtained and released by the DOJ, explicitly talks about securing Russia's preferred outcome in the election. Because there, while the party and the candidate names are redacted in the versions we have, it's pretty clear from the context clues that this means Trump and the Republicans, which absolutely makes sense because it lines up with what we've heard from intelligence officials in the past and just based on comments Trump has made in the past.
If we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
Though also there, I'll mention that there's a video going around today where Putin claims that he wants Harris to win. But really, we've seen most serious people having the impression that that was just a joke, because really everything points to his real preference being Trump. And in any case, this comes as the Biden-Harris administration has announced a bunch of new measures to fight back against Russian efforts to influence this year's election. With the State Department, for example, designating 5 Russian state-funded news outlets, including RT, as foreign government missions. So with that, making it harder require for employees of those outlets to get visas to the US. And then you have the DOJ seizing 32 internet domains that were reportedly used to spread Russian propaganda. There, notably, the websites being designed to look like authentic news sites, but they were actually fake. Also, the Treasury Department announced new sanctions, including against RT's editor-in-chief and 9 other employees. So the department saying there that the editor-in-chief is a, quote, central figure in Russian government malign influence efforts. And of course, all of this is on top of other actions that we've seen recently. Like in March, for example, the Treasury imposed sanctions on the Social Design Agency and another Russian company accused of creating fake news sites to spread misinformation. Also, law enforcement has reportedly even been investigating Americans who have worked with Russia's state television networks in the past. With that actually leading to another indictment today of a guy who was an advisor to Trump's first campaign and who's now accused of money laundering and violating sanctions. But of course, with all this, especially when you're talking about investigating Americans, there's a question about where the line is. Right? Some Americans, especially amongst Trump supporters, they see accusations that Russia is spreading disinformation as efforts to undermine their views. And to that point, you just have to take a quick look online, especially on X. Right? You had Russiagate trending, and you had people, not even necessarily just Trump supporters, saying things like, just as in 2016 and 2020, Biden admin to activate Russiagate propaganda to manipulate US opinion ahead of the 2024 election. Which, I will say, this is kind of more of a general statement. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, it never hurts to be a little bit skeptical. But I also think it's important not to have such an open mind that your brain slips out. And often what I see is, for some reason, when the topic of Russian interference pops up, some people will automatically try to make it sound like you're saying, oh, the election machines, those were tampered with by Russia. And what you're actually talking about are the bot and troll farms and the attempts to spread misinformation online, which has been seen and proven. Also, a big thing with this situation is you have people like Paul M. Barrett, the deputy director of the Stern Center for Business and Human Rights at NYU, arguing the government has to walk a fine line to distinguish between foreign election interference and free speech. And actually with that, you had him telling the New York Times, the dividing line is when you identify activity, particularly concealed activity, that is circumventing established regulations for how we try to prevent foreign interference in our election. Right? And if that line is crossed, he says, it's not a reason to just run up the free speech flag and throw up your hands and we're helpless in the face of Vladimir Putin's very clever operatives. And there, I should also say that Biden officials have made a point to say they are not aiming to curb free speech. Right? They've actually been saying that Americans won't be investigated just for repeating or spreading stories they see on Russian state media. And so far, we've seen no indication that that's untrue. Yeah, for now, that is where the situation's gonna end, though obviously we're gonna keep our eyes on it. And in the meantime, I gotta ask, what are your thoughts on any and all of this? Whether it be around Tenet, media, and the influencers there specifically, or just the situation as a whole?